Who should we live with when we get old? Watch this video to find out. Where should we call home in our golden years, dear friends? Westerners have cherished independence for ages, while Easterners have embraced the warmth of family living. This cultural divide is evident in their choices for old age. Many Westerners find comfort in nursing homes, a haven of solitude and care. In contrast, Easterners often envision their twilight years surrounded by the love of children and grandchildren, a traditional path to happiness. However, modern life's relentless pace can hinder children from providing the constant care their parents desire. Furthermore, the generation gap, clashing lifestyles and values, can strain relationships when elders share a home with their offspring. Thus, the age-old question persists. Is it wiser to live independently or under the same roof as our children? Let's explore this dilemma through the wisdom of life stories. The first story, old age living with children and grandchildren. You know, it's a funny thing about us older folks. Even when we've got enough money to live comfortably on our own, there's still this strong desire to be with our children and grandchildren. It's like a natural need, isn't it? And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. As we get on in years, our bodies start to slow down a bit, and we find our circle of friends getting smaller. It's no wonder we might feel a touch lonely now and then. That's just part of getting older, I suppose. Now, every family has its way of doing things, don't they? Some of us live with our kids, some don't. But here's the thing. If the children don't care about their parents, it doesn't matter if they're living under the same roof or clear across the country. It's all the same, isn't it? But if you've got good kids, the kind that care, they don't need to be in the same house to look after you. Living nearby, where they can pop in regularly to help out, can work just as well. It avoids all the fuss and bothers that can come from different generations trying to live together. You know, I've seen it happen. Sometimes when families live together, it can cause all sorts of problems. The younger folks have their ways, and we have ours. It's not always easy to see eye to eye on everything. But then again, I've also seen families where it works out beautifully. They find a way to respect each other's differences and make it work. More and more of us older folks are choosing to live near our families these days, rather than right with them. It's a good middle ground, isn't it? We're close enough to see our families often, get help when we need it, and be part of their daily lives. But we've still got our own space, our routines. It's like having your cake and eating it too. Of course, what works for one family might not work for another. The important thing is that there's love and respect, no matter what the living arrangements are. If the children are good and caring, they'll find a way to look after their parents, whether they're living together or not. So, what do you think about all this? Have you had any experiences with living with your children or grandchildren? Or maybe you prefer your own space. It's always interesting to hear different perspectives on these things. Now, what do you say we move on to our next story? I think you'll find it just as interesting, dear friends. Are you ready? The second story, comfortable when not living with children. You know, there's this couple, Mr. Jason and Mrs. Emily, who've got 2 boys. Now, here's the surprising bit. They don't want to live with either of them. Can you believe it? Even though both sons are in Hanoi, when it came time for them to get hitched, their parents gently showed them the door. Mrs. Emily, she's got her reasons. She says, "I've been a daughter-in-law myself, so I know all about the hassles of living together. That's why she and her husband decided that once the kids get married, they should have their place. Would you believe that when their younger boy got married and was a bit short on cash for a house, he asked to stay with them for a while? Mrs. Emily only gave him 3 months. She said, "After that, if you can't buy a place, you'll have to rent." Now don't think she's being mean. She says she's doing it for their good. You see, she figures the old folks and the young ones have different ways of living, and if they're under one roof for too long, there's bound to be some squabbles. These days, their older boys got a house about 6 miles from them, and the younger ones right next door in an apartment. On weekends, they all get together for a nice family meal at the grandparents' house. Isn't that nice? Someone asked Mrs. Emily if they'd move in with the kids when they got old and frail. She's got it all planned out. They're going to sell their big house, use half the money to buy a nice flat, no stairs to worry about, and save the rest for their golden years. If they get too weak, they'll hire some help or move to a nice retirement home. No need to be a bother to the kids and grandkids, she says. There's another lady, Mrs. Agatha, who's got the same idea. She's decided she'll live on her own while she's healthy, and when she's not, she'll get some help. When her boys got married, she gave them a big house in the city. They keep asking her to come live with them, but she won't budge. She says living in the countryside with her friends is more her cup of tea. In the city, it's all closed doors and quiet days. When she visits the kids, they're out all day and glued to their gadgets when they're home. She doesn't like the busy city streets, and she's always worried about burglars. No, she'd rather stick to her village ways. She's thought it all through, has Mrs. Agatha. If she gets sick, her kids can't look after her all the time anyway. They're too busy with work and such, so she figures she might as well stay put and get help if she needs it. The kids can visit when they can. Thinking like this makes her feel good about her golden years. You know, it seems like the old ways of big families all living together are changing. More and more of us older folks are taking charge of our own lives instead of depending on the kids. Living apart or nearby instead of all together is becoming quite popular. Some parents are planning for their later years way in advance. When the kids get married, they say right off the bat, "You have your place. We'll help with the grandkids when needed, but otherwise, we'll do our own thing." They eat what they want, travel, and have fun with their friends, all on their terms. Some are even choosing to move into retirement communities, even when they've got loving kids who'd be happy to look after them. What do you think about all this? Does it sound like something you'd consider? It's always interesting to hear what other folks think about these things. The third story, old age in nursing homes. Now here's a tale that might surprise you. There's this lady, Mrs. Beatrice. After her husband passed on, she did something that shocked her family. She sold her house and used her pension to move into a retirement home. Can you imagine? Her kids and grandkids were taken aback. They thought it wasn't right for her to go to a home when they were around to care for her. In their minds, it made them look like they weren't good children. But Mrs. Beatrice, she's a wise one. She sat them down and explained her thinking. She said, "Look, I'm not as young as I used to be. My way of living doesn't fit with yours anymore. If we lived together, we'd just get in each other's way." She figured if she stayed with them, she'd be lonely all day, stuck in the house with no one her age to chat with. All her children live in those fancy apartments full of young folks, you see. Not many seniors around for a good chinwag. But in the retirement home, she'd have friends to talk to and good meals, and her family could visit whenever they had the time. This way, everyone could be happy and relaxed. It's better for all of us, she told them. You won't have to worry about me, and I won't feel like I'm imposing. At first, her family was a bit uneasy about it all. They'd visit her with worried looks on their faces. But you know what? She thrived there. She was happy and healthy, and that put their minds at ease. During holidays and Tet, she'd come to stay with them for a week or two, then head back to her new home. She even started telling her old friends how wonderful it was, encouraging them to give it a try too. You should see how comfortable it is, she'd say. Why not come and be happy with us? Now let me tell you about Mr. David. He's 70 from Taibin. Instead of moving to the city with his son, he chose to live in a retirement home. His son had settled in the city with his own family, and after Mr. David's wife passed, he thought about staying in the countryside alone. But his family kept asking him to move in with them. Come to the city, Dad, they'd say. We'll take care of you. He didn't want to refuse, so he tried living with them for a couple of years. But oh my, did he feel trapped? All he did was watch TV all day, couldn't go anywhere or talk to anyone because of his Parkinson's. He felt like his golden years were slipping away behind closed doors. Then one day, he saw a TV show about retirement homes. It was like a light bulb went off in his head. He did some digging, looking up information online, and thought, this could work for me. He told his family he wanted to give it a try for a few months. They were worried at first, but saw how eager he was and agreed. Lo and behold, it made him healthier. He had friends to chat with and got good care every day. He liked it so much, he sat down with his family and talked about using his military pension to stay there permanently. I feel alive again, he told them. You know, once he made that decision, his family felt at ease too. They could focus on their work without worrying about their meals or daily care. It turned out to be a blessing for everyone. They didn't have to fret about him being alone all day, or whether he was eating right. It seems like times are changing, doesn't it? More and more of us older folks are looking at different ways to spend our golden years. Some are choosing to live in these retirement communities, even when they've got loving families who'd be happy to look after them. It's not about pushing away the family, mind you. It's about finding what works best for everyone. What do you think about all this? It's a different way of doing things, isn't it? But it seems to work well for some folks. Have you ever thought about what you'd like to do in your later years? Maybe live with the kids, or have your place nearby? Or does the idea of a retirement community appeal to you? It's always good to have a plan, don't you think? And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. What matters most is finding what makes you happy and keeps you healthy in your golden years. There have been quite a few opinions suggesting that putting elderly parents in nursing homes goes against tradition and that children want to abandon their parents. However, reality shows that more and more elderly people are actively choosing to live in nursing homes. Some are lonely. Some have children busy with work and no time to take care of them. Some want a quiet place to retire. And more importantly, they are truly comfortable and happy with that decision of theirs. Dear friends, who to live with when getting old is a very difficult question to answer because it depends on each circumstance and each family. But whether choosing to live with children and grandchildren or live separately in old age, parents and children also need to have a correct view of the nature of old age life. which is to live happily and healthily, maintain ethical values and lifestyle in the family. Parents can live together or separately depending on conditions and circumstances, not necessarily imposing the way of life. Young rely on father, old rely on children. Sometimes parents will have a peaceful and comfortable life in old age. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and see you again. And